Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be talking about AI and specifically responsible AI use, especially at universities.
Really important topic these days.
Yeah, and so we're diving into the University of Illinois Springfield's training module on using generative AI responsibly.
I think that's great that UIS is taking the lead on this.
Yeah.
With AI becoming so prevalent, it's really essential to use these tools thoughtfully.
Absolutely. So this module focuses on three main things: ethical considerations, data privacy, and university policies.
That's all very important.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. So first off, what is generative AI?
Well, I think a good way to think about generative AI is that it's not just analyzing existing data, it's creating something new.
Yeah.
So, you hear about faculty at UIS using it to make teaching materials or sum up research articles. That's generative AI in action.
So it's not just, taking information that's already there and you're rearranging it. It's actually creating.
Yeah, it's going a step further and creating new content based on what it's learned.
That's really interesting. And the module talks about some potential problems with that, like AI hallucinations. What does that even mean?
Yeah, so that's basically when an AI system spits out something that sounds totally plausible,
Okay.
but it's actually inaccurate. Imagine a historical figure being depicted in a totally wrong way, or even events that never happened being presented as fact.
Oh, wow.
That can happen if the AI is trained on data that's biased or incomplete.
So it's like it's making stuff up.
In a way, yeah, it's creating content that isn't grounded in reality. And that's a big concern, especially when you think about how much we rely on information we find online.
That's a little unnerving.
It is. It really underscores the need to be critical of what we see from AI.
Absolutely. So how about data privacy? That's another big one.
Okay.
What happens to our data when we use these AI tools?
Yeah, that's a huge question. We've all heard those stories about Apple's Siri collecting recordings without consent.
Right.
Or other platforms accessing our data without permission. That's a real concern.
Definitely. So how does UIS approach data security with these AI tools?
Well, they have a really thoughtful system in place. They classify data as public, internal, confidential, or regulated.
Okay.
So public data is generally safe to share, but confidential data like student records, that's a whole other story.
Right.
That should never be shared with AI tools unless you have explicit authorization and really strong security measures in place.
So there are clear boundaries to protect sensitive information.
Exactly. And what about regulated data, like health information?
Yeah, that's super sensitive.
Absolutely. That falls under really strict laws like FERPA, which protects student educational records, and HIPAA, which safeguards health information.
I've heard of those.
Yeah, they're really important. Sharing regulated data with AI tools without proper safeguards could have serious legal consequences.
So if you're ever in doubt about what data can be shared, it's always best to err on the side of caution.
Absolutely. UIS really stresses that in their module.
Okay, now let's talk about UIS guidelines. The module talks about their specific policies on AI use, especially transparency and academic honesty.
Yeah, those are key principles in an academic environment. Students need to be upfront about using AI in their work.
Right.
And faculty need to be open about how it's being used in grading or administration. It's all about maintaining trust.
That makes sense. I'm curious about how UIS specifically addresses academic integrity in this context. The module mentioned Copyleaks.
Oh, yeah. Copyleaks is a really interesting tool. It's a plagiarism and AI detection software.
Yeah.
And UIS uses it within their learning management system, Canvas.
Yeah.
So it's designed to help catch instances of plagiarism, especially when AI might be involved.
But I imagine it's not foolproof.
It's not. It's a really helpful tool, but it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It should be seen as a starting point for investigation, not a final judgment.
So human judgment still plays a key role.
Absolutely. We can't just rely on algorithms to make those decisions.
Let's say a student uses an AI tool to brainstorm ideas.
Yeah.
Would that be considered plagiarism?
That's a good question. It depends on how it's used. If the student is just using AI to get their creative juices flowing and then writing their own original work,
Okay.
that's different from the AI actually writing the whole paper.
Got it.
UIS distinguishes between AI-generated work where the AI does most of the heavy lifting and AI-assisted work where the student is still the primary author.
So there's a clear line between using AI as a tool versus relying on it to do the work for you.
Exactly. And that's a distinction both students and faculty need to be aware of.
It seems like the module includes some interactive scenarios. Would those be helpful for understanding these nuances?
Oh, definitely. Those scenarios are great. They take these complex ideas and put them into real-world situations.
Like what kind of scenarios?
Well, there's one about a student using AI for research, and another about a staff member using AI to summarize reports that might have sensitive information.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe we could dive into one of those scenarios to make things a little more concrete for our listeners.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so let's say you're a staff member at UIS, and you're tasked with summarizing a ton of internal reports.
Sounds fun.
And these reports have sensitive information about staff performance and departmental finances. You're thinking about using AI to help you get through it all faster. What are some of the ethical things you'd need to consider?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is data classification. Is this information public, internal, confidential, or regulated?
Right.
And from what you're describing, it sounds like confidential data, which needs to be handled really carefully.
Yeah, and we know that confidential data shouldn't be shared with AI tools without the proper authorization and security protocols.
Exactly. So before even thinking about using an AI tool for this,
Right.
this staff member needs to talk to their supervisor and probably UIS's IT or legal department to see if it's even allowed to use an outside AI platform with this data.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And even if they do get the green light, transparency is still really important.
Absolutely. If they end up using AI for summarization, they have to be upfront about it when they present their work to their department head.
Right.
They should clearly say that AI was used and explain the limitations of the tool.
That's a good point. So it's clear that they're still the one responsible for the accuracy of the summaries.
Exactly. AI is a tool. It can't replace human judgment.
So even something as simple as summarizing reports can have these ethical implications when AI is involved.
It definitely does. And I think the scenario highlights why UIS is putting so much emphasis on responsible AI use.
Yeah.
By giving their community clear guidelines and training, they're really helping people make ethical choices in their work.
It's fascinating how something that seems so straightforward like summarizing reports can suddenly become ethically complex when you bring AI into the equation.
It really is. And this is just scratching the surface. As AI evolves and becomes even more ingrained in our lives, our ethical frameworks are going to have to evolve too.
That's a great point. We'll definitely continue this conversation in part 2 of the deep dive, where we'll explore some best practices for using these tools responsibly.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we're continuing our conversation about using AI responsibly. And now we're going to get into some practical tips. So what are some things our listeners can actually do to make sure they're using these tools in a good way, especially, within the UIS framework?
Well, UIS actually offers some really solid advice in their module. One of the biggest things is to really think critically about what the AI is giving you.
Yeah.
Don't just blindly accept the results. Always double check things, think about potential biases, and use your own judgment.
So it's like that saying, trust but verify,
Mm.
right? It applies to AI too.
Exactly. And another big one is transparency. You always want to be upfront about how and when you're using AI.
Yeah.
Like if you're a student and you're using AI to help with a paper, make sure you acknowledge that in your citations. Or if you're faculty and you're using AI for lecture examples, let your students know.
So it's all about being open and honest.
Yeah, it builds trust and helps everyone understand how AI is being used.
And it's super important for academic integrity, which UIS really emphasizes.
Definitely. Another good practice is data minimization.
Data minimization. What's that?
It basically means only sharing the information that's absolutely necessary for the task at hand. Don't give the AI more data than it needs, especially if it's sensitive.
Okay, so like if I'm using an AI chatbot to help me write an email,
Yeah,
I shouldn't give it access to like my entire contact list or personal files.
exactly. Be smart about what you're sharing and why. And if you're ever unsure, just err on the side of caution and protect your data.
That's good advice.
But yeah.
So these are all great practical tips. But AI is constantly changing. How can people stay up to date on like the latest ethical guidelines and best practices, especially within UIS?
Well, UIS really encourages continuous learning and adaptation. They emphasize the importance of staying informed about what's new in AI ethics.
So it's not like a one-time training. It's an ongoing process.
Right. You got to keep learning and reflecting. And UIS offers a bunch of ways to do that. They have workshops. They encourage discussions about AI ethics. They even point people to helpful resources like articles and policy updates.
It sounds like they're trying to create a culture where everyone is involved in figuring out this AI thing.
Absolutely. It's a group effort.
And I think that's a key takeaway for our listeners, especially those at UIS. It's not about being scared of AI or rejecting it. It's about approaching it thoughtfully and ethically. And it sounds like UIS is providing a lot of support for that.
Yeah, they're definitely setting a good example.
What stands out to you most about their approach?
I think it's how they combine practical guidance with ethical considerations.
Mhm.
They don't just say, here are the rules, they explain why the rules are important.
Right, so it's not just about following the rules blindly.
Exactly. It's about understanding the reasoning behind them.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about making informed decisions.
Right. And their focus on transparency and continuous learning is really commendable. It shows that they're serious about making responsible AI use everyone's responsibility.
Before we wrap up this part, is there one thing you want to leave our listeners with, especially those who are part of the UIS community?
I'd say don't be afraid to explore the potential of AI, but always be aware of its limitations and the potential problems that come with it.
Yep.
UIS is a great resource for navigating all of this. They're there to offer guidance and support every step of the way.
Sounds like they're really committed to making sure AI is used ethically and effectively.
Definitely. I think they're setting a strong example for other universities to follow.
Well said. So in part 3 of the deep dive, we're going to look at some more specific ways UIS is getting its community ready for this new world of AI. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. It's our final part.
Time flies.
It does. So we've been talking about responsible AI use, and UIS is doing a lot to help people use these tools the right way. So in this last part, let's really focus on what UIS is doing to get its students, faculty, and staff ready for this whole new world of AI.
It's exciting, but also a little daunting, right?
Definitely. So we've been talking about this training module that UIS put together.
Right.
And it seems like they really focus on giving people practical advice, not just, theory, but actual strategies they can use in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, knowing the ethical principles is important, but actually applying them in real life, that's the real challenge.
Absolutely. And UIS seems to be doing a great job of connecting the dots, bridging that gap between theory and practice.
I agree.
One thing that stood out to me was how they use these interactive scenarios
Oh, yeah.
to help people really grapple with some of these ethical dilemmas.
Those are so helpful. You can read about these issues all day long, but when you actually put yourself in a specific situation, it
Right.
really makes you think.
Totally. So like one of the scenarios is about a faculty member who's using AI to grade student essays.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
And the AI flags one of the essays as potentially plagiarized.
Tricky situation.
It is. So what's a professor supposed to do?
Well, that's exactly the point. It's not always a clear-cut answer. And that scenario really highlights how important human judgment still is.
Right, because we can't just blindly trust what the AI tells us.
Exactly. The module really stresses that, tools like Copyleaks can be helpful, but they shouldn't be the only thing you rely on.
Especially when you're making a serious accusation like plagiarism.
Yeah, you always have to investigate further, talk to the student, take everything into account.
Maybe they just made an honest mistake,
Hmm.
or maybe they used an AI writing assistant in a way that triggered the plagiarism detector.
Right. There are a lot of possibilities. So it's really about using AI as a tool to help you make a decision, not as like the final word.
I like that AI is a tool, not the final word.
And that's where human judgment comes in. You need critical thinking, skills, empathy. You need to understand the context.
It's not just about the algorithm.
Nope.
Okay, so there's another scenario that I found really interesting.
Right.
This one's about a researcher who's using AI to analyze a massive data set.
Sound like fun.
And the AI finds this statistically significant correlation between two variables.
Okay.
So how should the researcher interpret that?
Well, it can be tempting to think, oh, the AI found a correlation, so it must be true.
Right, because the AI is so smart.
Right, but that's not always the case. Just
Yeah.
because something is statistically significant doesn't necessarily mean it's actually meaningful or that there's a real cause and effect relationship.
So the researcher still needs to think critically.
Absolutely. They need
Yeah.
to look at other factors that might be influencing the data, maybe talk to colleagues and get different perspectives.
So again, it's about using AI as a starting point,
Yeah.
not as the definitive answer.
Exactly.
UIS also gives a lot of guidance on how to document AI use in a transparent way. Yeah, that's crucial.
Which is really important for academic integrity and for making sure research is reproducible.
Exactly. If you're using AI in your research, you got to be upfront about it. You got to say what tools you use, how you use them, what limitations you encountered.
So other people can understand your process.
Right, and maybe even try to replicate your work.
It also just builds trust and accountability.
Absolutely.
So it seems like responsible AI use really boils down to a few key things.
Okay.
Being thoughtful about how you use these tools, being ethical in your approach, and being transparent every step of the way.
I think you nailed it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into UIS's approach to responsible AI.
We have.
But as we wrap things up, is there one big takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember?
I think the main thing is this AI is incredibly powerful. It offers amazing possibilities, but it also comes with challenges. And UIS is doing a fantastic job of showing how to use this technology responsibly and ethically.
It's great to see them leading the way. Yeah, they're really empowering their community to navigate this exciting but complex new world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope you found this exploration of responsible AI insightful and empowering. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.